Right, good. Just testing. Now, I hope you've been enjoying these talks. Last week, we made a mistake in terms of the way we sent out the talks, and it was sent out so I had written it. Well, I hadn't. Georgie wrote that talk, and you had it here on the Thursday, so I hope you've enjoyed that one. This one is really coming out of an experience of my life about, well, it roots back to a time when I was just about to go off to university. And I fell in love with a city, namely Amsterdam. I really do enjoy visiting Amsterdam, and this was one of the first times I'd been to Amsterdam. I went round some of the museums. I've been round them a few years before, but this time was my first time to really go round the Rijksmuseum. Have any of you been round the Rijksmuseum? Did you enjoy it? Yeah. I mean, it's a bit staid, but they're good pictures. Well, when I went to Amsterdam, I was wanting to find out something different. And I went to the Museum of Modern Art. And the reason for me going there was because my parents, particularly my mother, was very keen on me understanding art, but she didn't understand modern art. So I tried to educate myself a bit. I still didn't really know what it was about. So I walked through these galleries of modern art, and it was all right. It was fairly interesting. Then I turned into one small room, probably about the size of that little alcove. And just about where that 2 is, there was a picture. And it really struck home. It was a picture about this size, not very big, a load of grass, and I think it was a red background. And there was one finger. And there was a cut on that finger. And I went. And then I understood the purpose of modern art. To get you to engage with who you are, your experience of life. To move you beyond the saying, oh, that's a nice picture. I wouldn't want that picture in my house. But it was a transformationary moment for me. And what it made me aware of is something which I've been working on for a long time since, is the difference between liking and loving. You can like a Rembrandt. You can like the pictures in the Rijksmuseum. You can like to walk around, and they are beautiful pictures. But do they touch your heart? Do they get you to engage with who you are and your experience of life? Because that's what this did for me. And it made me realise that loving is a different quality to liking. Liking, you can like ice cream. You can like cream buns. They may not do you any good, but you can like them. But when you love something, you're prepared to commit yourself to it. It resonates with you. It moves you. And that's really the subject of what we're talking about today. Love is about engaging with the situation. And it's only really present when you are involved, when you're committed in your being, when there's something that moves within you. When your feelings are stirred and you want to respond to that, that is when you know that you are moving into a connection which is to do with love. And I believe that compassion is the way in which we connect with the outside world. that we allow something that is beyond you to impact on who you are and your experience. It's the way in which you engage with something beyond yourself. Okay. So that's where I'm putting compassion. Now let me tell you another story. This story comes from a time which was much later in my life, and I was working in West London. And the office had moved to a block where you couldn't get to easily by train. You had to go by car. So day after day I'd go backwards and forwards along the M4. Now, I don't know whether you know the M4, whether you know it at rush hour times, but it's not a particularly pleasant place to be. You're bumper to bumper, you are either going at 55 miles an hour or you're stationary. One or the other. And all of a sudden it'll open up and you'll roar away, and then all of a sudden, for no apparent reason, it'll come to a stop. That's what it was like that Friday afternoon that I'm going to tell you about. I get very tired at the end of the day, and when I was travelling to work by train, it was almost inevitable that before the train left Paddington Station, I would be asleep. So travelling by car on the M4 at rush hour was not a pleasant experience for me. There was only one thing that I wanted to do, and that was fall asleep. And of course I couldn't do that. I had to concentrate on where I was going. I could only fall asleep when I got home. I actually have fallen asleep on the M4 while driving, but that was when it was stationary. That was good. But on this evening, I was driving along. It was normal sort of traffic, and all of a sudden, it came to a stop. Now, I saw in my rear view mirror there was another car which was speeding along. I thought, he's not going to be able to stop in time. Bang! A bumper flew into the air. Bits were all over the place. What did I do? Now, being a good, honest, priestly sort of person, I stopped my car, got out of it, made sure everyone was there. No, I didn't. I drove home. I wanted to get home. I let my self-interest get in the way of responding in the way that I would like to have responded. And how did that feel? It made me feel as though my humanity had been diminished. It is a moment that I've lived with and known that this is a touchstone that I do not want to revisit. When I denied compassion. Now, you could say, well, okay, what? Do you know what compassion feels like? To experience it from other direction. Going to another point of my life. In my university days, late university, I had a car. And I decided that it would be good to go and visit Europe. Now, being that I was a student, I had a car. That car was not in a particularly healthy state. Anyway, we decided to go around Scandinavia. And we're going around Scandinavia in September. Now, if you're ever considering doing this yourself, don't. Going around Scandinavia in a car, using a tent, is not a good idea. You get wet. It rains a lot. And because it rains a lot, it means that your car is under pressure. The day in question, what happened? We camped fairly close to Bergen, and it rained all night. It rained so much that the rain had come in through the tent, and I woke up feeling my legs are wet. Why? The sleeping bag was in a puddle of water which was contained by the ground sheet. So my sleeping bag was soaked. The car outside was soaked. We put all the tent stuff together and we tried to dry out the things within the car, and we set off. And as we set off, we were going through some wonderful scenery. We realised there was a little bit of a problem with the car. It wasn't behaving quite the way we wanted to. But we got up to this mountain pass, and it was a beautiful view. So what did we want to do? We wanted to stop. So we stopped for me to take a picture. I took the picture. I got back into the car, turned the key, and it went. Try again. Wouldn't start. So there we were, in this mountain pass, miles away from anywhere, a group of 4 people, none of which spoke Norwegian, none of which knew the mechanics of the car sufficiently to say, we'll get it going. Stuck, isolated. Yes, there were cars going by, lots of Norwegians, and Norwegians are friendly to the English, but they didn't stop. They were too interested in what they got to do, where they got to get to. Now, there's one nation that I knew from that trip that the Norwegians did not particularly like. They'd suffered from them during the war. This car came by. German number plates. It stopped. What do you want? We can't start our car. I've got some jump leads. Put the cars together. Jump start. Wave bye-bye. We didn't speak German. They didn't speak proper English. We got going. They responded to me with compassion. Why? Why? Why was it that the foreigner responded to another foreigner with compassion? Question. But it does put a different light on the story of the Good Samaritan. Yes, that journey home, we eventually changed the battery. But I do remember one funny incident. There was a toll booth that we had to stop at to pay the money. Now we knew that if the car stopped, we couldn't start it with the engine, with the key. So we rolled to a stop, paid the fee, and then let the handbrake off. It was a very silent start, but it did get going. But that's why, when I'd experienced what compassion is in one situation, why couldn't I do it when faced with a very similar situation several years later? And I think it is that self-interest got in the way of my humanity. So, what was Jesus asked was the greatest commandment? What did he respond? Love God and love your neighbour as yourself. And when he said, well, who is my neighbour? Then we get the story of the Good Samaritan. And I believe that if we are to understand what loving your neighbour is all about, then it is inevitable that we have to engage with compassion. Compassion is a vital link to understanding what Jesus' commandment, love your neighbour as yourself, is all about. And when we allow compassion into our lives, then our lives are not wholly self-determined. We are opening ourselves up to experience life in a broader way, and we are opening ourselves up to experiencing it in a way which could be costly to ourselves. But this is the way that you and I will honour our full humanity. To allow compassion to form that bridge between ourselves and others. If we want love your neighbour as yourself to be true for us, then compassion has to be something that we fully engaged with. Okay, so what happens when we allow compassion to be there? We allow ourselves to be engaging with another person's situation, yes. We can recognise their predicament and we want to respond. We don't just gawp. We don't just pass by on the other side. But we say, life is not about my amusement. It's about my engagement. Yes, you're going to be taking me into a place where I don't necessarily want to be, but that is the demand of love. That is what is being asked of me at this time. And it makes you experience life in ways which you wouldn't have otherwise chosen for yourself. Now, you might say, well, how did that experience of the picture in Amsterdam, why was that one the moment in which I understood something about modern art? That it was part of this journey to understanding compassion. Well, I believe that actually compassion starts in people's lives not from an intellectual process, but by you knowing what it feels like to be in a situation, to know how you have been hurt in your life. These hands are hands of a carpenter. And as hands of a carpenter, I've been learning the craft of shaping wood all my life. But they are very scarred hands. They've been cut many times, sometimes deeply. When I looked at that picture, I winced with pain. Because I knew what it was like to have gone through that pain. And that is why I offered to you, saying, can we be compassionate if we haven't suffered pain? I think pain opens up the door of compassion. Yes, we can keep it closed with self-interest, but the chance of moving into a compassionate understanding of life is there for us. It's been provided for us by our experience of pain. It is a positive response to pain and suffering rather than just dismissing it as something which is undesirable. Compassion, in my understanding, doesn't necessarily happen naturally, but it happens because we've been stimulated into it by our own suffering. And because we know what we want when we are suffering in that sort of situation, we know what the response is that we'd like to receive. And when we are sufficiently engaged with compassion, we move out of our own place of safety into the place where we can relate to another person. And as we relate to that person in that compassionate way, our love is felt in a real way, a really valuable way. It is the invitation, compassion is the invitation for you and I to experience love in a very profound way. Compassion doesn't allow us to gawp. It means that we move beyond ourselves into the picture. Now, how can we stimulate this? Well, any of you might know that one of the things that is very key to me in my understanding of prayer is Ignatian prayer. And in Ignatian prayer, you are invited to move into the story and to put yourself into the story and see what happens. Now, what I know from my own understanding of Ignatian prayer is that at first, when you try it, you try to control it with your mind. And you try and say, well, what's this story trying to tell me? Ignatian prayer means something when you go beyond that stage. And the story alerts you to times in your own life that you had perhaps long buried. And it makes you experience things which are related in your mind and your experience of life to the situation that you're reading about in that Bible passage. And then that passage is not just there on the page, it's becoming part of your life. Because your life and that passage are beginning to resonate. So what Ignatian prayer now enables me to do is to move into a situation and to resonate with it and to find what it is in that past experience which God is trying to say, Andrew, remember. Remember how this experience is actually a gift to deepen your experience of life. To deepen your experience of your interaction with others. Because then the love that you share will be more real. So I believe that compassion is a vital quality for us to reach across to another, to enter into their life in a meaningful way. And it is stimulated by our own experience of suffering and pain. It's when we are motivated sufficiently by both our faith and our experience of life that we make connections with other people which are very meaningful. I believe that compassion is a vital quality for us to engage with if we want to honour what Jesus said, love your neighbour as yourself. And it is as we love our neighbour as ourselves that our experience of love goes far beyond liking and forms bridges and welcomes us into experiences of life which are far more enriching to us and enable us to engage with others in a very meaningful way. I believe that that is the way in which we are invited to make God's kingdom much more of a reality in today's world than we ever can do by a purely head-centered faith. Thanks very much.